So the state recruited them for these massive building projects. It was a highly organized national effort rather than some kind of forced, brutal captivity. And we know this for a fact because of incredible archaeological finds right near the Giza Plateau. Researchers have uncovered a vast, purpose-built worker village. Inside, they found long dormitories meant to comfortably house the workers, along with hundreds of thousands of bread jars to feed these massive crews. Even cooler, animal bones excavated at the site show that these workers were eating prime cuts of beef. That's a luxury diet that forced laborers simply wouldn't ever receive. They even found the bureaucratic seals detailing exactly how officials meticulously organized and supplied this whole workforce. My absolute favorite detail, though, has to be the graffiti. High up in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, workers literally painted the names of their teams in red ochre. They had names like the Friends of Khufu Gang or the White Crown of Kunum Kafu is powerful. It's just so relatable, right? It shows a brilliant sense of pride, camaraderie, and team identity. These weren't nameless captives. They were proud participants working to secure their king's eternal legacy. All right, moving on to Section 4, Religion and the Afterlife. Now that we know who built them, we have to ask why. Because the design of the pyramid wasn't just, a structurally convenient shape for stacking rocks. It held incredibly deep theological meaning. It actually represented the very first mound of earth that arose from Nu, the mythological, lifeless waters of creation. So just as that primeval mound brought the very first sign of life to the universe, the pyramid itself was essentially a magical engine meant to grant the deceased pharaoh a new eternal life. It was quite literally a resurrection machine made of stone. To really grasp the mechanics of this afterlife, you have to separate the ancient Egyptian concept of the soul into distinct parts. Two of the big ones were the Ka and the Ba. The Ka was essentially a spiritual twin of the person. It stayed closely tied to the physical body and actually needed food and drink to survive, which is exactly why all those offerings were left in the tomb. The Ba, on the other hand, was usually depicted as a human-headed bird. This was the mobile, dynamic part of the soul that could fly out of the tomb, travel between the earthly and spiritual worlds, and then return back to the body to rest. But here's the catch. For the Ka and Ba to survive, that physical vessel absolutely had to remain intact. To prepare the body for this wild cosmic journey and preserve an anchor for the soul, priests undertook a breathtakingly meticulous 70-day mummification process. They would carefully remove the decaying internal organs. But get this, they intentionally left the heart inside the chest. Why? Because they believed the heart, not the brain, was the true center of being and intelligence. After that, the body was dried out, anointed by special priests, and meticulously wrapped up in linen. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the Magic Pyramid Texts. To really understand the final piece of this puzzle, we have to step deep inside the subterranean burial chambers to look at the intense magic meant to guide the pharaohs to the stars. Because preserving the body just wasn't enough, the soul actually needed a spiritual map. Starting in the 5th dynasty with Pharaoh Unmas, builders started covering the walls of the burial chambers with these dense columns of intricate hieroglyphs. We call them the pyramid texts. Predating the famous Book of the Dead by hundreds of years, these archaic texts were totally unillustrated and were reserved exclusively for the pharaoh, and later on, his queens. They were this massive collection of spells, rituals, and incantations, totally designed to guarantee the king's transformation into an eternal spirit. And honestly, some of these texts are shockingly visceral. Take a famous passage known as the Cannibal Hymn, for example. In this spell, the deceased king is depicted as a cosmic hunter who literally slaughters the gods. He cooks them in pots as if they were sacrificial bowls and eats their entrails. I know it's an intense metaphor, but the idea was that by consuming the deities, the king absorbs their divine powers and magic, making absolutely sure he has the ultimate power to negotiate his passage into the afterlife and rule the heavens. Now, this intense magic wasn't just for the afterlife journey. It was also about serious physical protection. Take a look at this quote from the Curse Hymn, found in the Pyramid of Pepi I. It is a terrifying apotropic warning, basically a magical ward designed to keep tomb robbers and malignant spirits far, far away. It promises that anyone who even lays a finger on the pyramid will be condemned by the gods, left homeless in the afterlife, and cursed to literally devour their own flesh. It just goes to show how desperately they wanted to protect these sacred spaces for eternity. So as we wrap up this explainer today, it really leaves you wondering about the ultimate success of this entire grand project.
These pharaohs spent their entire reigns, vast amounts of national wealth, and the labor of tens of thousands of people to ensure they would live forever. Now sure, their physical bodies and treasures were largely plundered by time, but their names? Khufu, Sneferu, Unas? We are still speaking them today. By studying their magnificent pyramids, reading their magical texts out loud, and just marveling at their engineering thousands of years later, did we actually give these pharaohs the exact eternal life they were so desperately seeking? It's definitely something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the pyramids of Egypt, and keep seeking out the fascinating stories that shape our world.